Max and give you a rundown of how the evening will proceed. So, Max has written a short talk here, relatively short, half an hour, I think, on William Blake and his unique conception of astral determinism, or astral antinomianism, or basically opposition to the prescribed law as conceptualized by astrology. This was something which Blake developed in the last period of his life most fully and most completely, but it colours almost everything he wrote or painted. We can see it in his early work, see it in his later work too. If you want to be reductive about it, you could say it's Blake's opposition to authority wherever he found it, be that temporal or divine. The evening will begin with a short biographical introduction to William Blake, his life and his work, and that will take the form of a two-part drama. By two parts, I mean two speakers, it doesn't go on solo. Myself and Kuba Elb here, one of the Legschaft von Laidak, will perform this drama at the beginning. Yeah. After that will come the talk from Max here. I think there's something fairly original being observed here about Blake by focusing on a period which, in my reading, I haven't seen focused on so much. And Max will develop the idea that I just set out there. That's the second part of the evening. The third part will be a Q&A. I don't think everybody's up on what that involves. Ask Max some questions. He will do his best to respond. And then the last, and indeed the longest part of the evening will take the form of a sort of open mic. There will be instruments provided over here, and we invite all and sundry to come up and perform whatever they want, even something tangentially related to Blake, the content of the talk, or anything else. It will not be terribly strictly enforced, and we'll all be drunk at that point anyway. So, and things will broadly just go on in that manner until whatever hour of the morning we all stumble out of here, you know, hopefully with our heads full of some of the best stuff that's ever been written. And as close as possible to dying as Blake did on that Sunday evening in 1827, a fulfilled, happy and majestically complete man. So I'll just introduce Max very briefly. Max is a Blake expert from the University of Glasgow, where we both attended, by a Blake expert from the University of Glasgow. All I mean is that he completed an undergraduate degree, nothing else. But he did do his undergraduate final dissertation on William Blake and won the prize for the best dissertation in the whole university. Shortly afterwards, he was groomed by a professor of ours to go to Oxford University, was offered a place, and then very wisely turned it down. You know, getting the hell out of Anglo academia, which we all know is fast coming to its collapse anyway. As you get out of the university, you can read things like Blake a lot more truly and a lot more fully. So, yeah, that is the programme for the evening. Introductory drama, Max's talk, Q&A, and then an open mic for the remainder of the evening. So, we can get started very quickly with this introductory drama to Blake's life and work. And for this, I'd like to introduce Kuba here, who will play the part of a recording angel who questions Blake, and Blake will reply in his own melodious words and poetry. Let's do it.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Gotta get into character. A memorable fancy, Blake at the gates of hell. William Blake was the second son of James Blake and Catherine, his wife, and was born on the 28th of November 1757 in 28 Broad Street, Carnaby Market, London. His father, a respectable hosier, caused him to be educated for his own business, but the love of art came early on the boy. He neglected the figures of arithmetic for those of Raphael and Reynolds, and his worthy parents often wondered how a child of theirs should have conceived a love of such unsubstantial vanities.
My mother groaned, my father wept. Into the dangerous world I leapt, helpless, naked, piping loud, like a fiend hid in a cloud. Struggling in my father's hands, striving against the swaddling bands. Bound and weary, I thought best to sulk upon my mother's breast.
On Peckham Ride was, well, quite a child, 8 or 10 perhaps, that Blake had his first vision. Sauntering along, the boy looked up and saw a tree filled with angels, bright angelic wings bespangling every bough like stars. Returning home, he related the incident, and only through his mother's intercession, thank you for this intercession, and only through his mother's intercession escaped a thrashing from his father for telling a lie.
The fields from Islington to Marylebone, to Primrose Hill and St. John's Wood, were builded over with pillars of gold, and there Jerusalem's pillars stood. Her little ones ran on the fields, the Lamb of God seen among them, the Lamb of God among them seen, and fair Jerusalem his bride among the little meadows green.
His father began to be pleased with the notice which his son obtained, and to fancy that a painter's study might, after all, be a fitter place than a hosier's shop for one who drew designs on the backs of all the shop bills and made sketches on the counter.
What was he doing at that time? From 12 years old to manly prime. Was he then idle or the less about his father's business? Or was his wisdom held in scorn before his wrath began to burn in miracles throughout the land?
Blake continued making designs for his own amusement, whenever he could steal a moment from the routine of business, and began a course of study at the Royal Academy under the eye of Mr. Moser. Here he drew with great care perhaps all, or certainly nearly all, the noble antique figures in various views, but now his peculiar notions began to intercept him in his career.
I was once looking over the prints from Raphael and Michelangelo in the library of the Royal Academy. Moser came up to me and said, "You should not study these old, hard, stiff and dry, unfinished works. Stay a little and I will show you what you should study." He then went and took down Le Brun and Rubens' galleries. How I did secretly rage! I also spoke my mind. I said to Moser, "These things you call finished, but they are not even begun."
Well, one evening at a friend's house, Blake was bemoaning in a corner his loved crosses. His listener, a dark-eyed girl, Catherine Boucher, frankly declared she pitied him from the heart. Do you pity me? Yes, I do most sincerely. Then I love you for that, he replied with enthusiasm.
What is it men and women do require? The lineaments of gratified desire. What is it women do in men require? The lineaments of gratified desire.
The lovers were married, Blake being in his 25th year, the bride in her 21st on a Sunday, 18th of August, 1782, in the then newly rebuilt church of Battersea. A handsome edifice, say contemporary topographers.
Oh, hail matrimony made of love! To thy wild gates how great a drove on purpose to be yoked do come. Then come ye maidens, come ye swains, come and be eased of all your pains in matrimony's golden cage.
The poet and his wife did everything in making his books, writing, designing, printing, engraving, everything except manufacturing the paper, the very ink, or color rather, they did make. Never before surely was a man so literally the author of his own book.
The labours of the artist, the poet, the musician, have been proverbially attended by poverty and obscurity. This was never the fault of the public, but was owing to a neglect of means to propagate such works as have wholly absorbed the man of genius. Even Milton and Shakespeare could not publish their own works.
To Blake, at this date, as to ardent minds everywhere, the French Revolution was the herald of the millennium, of a new age of light and reason. He courageously donned the famous symbol of liberty and equality, the bonnet rouge, in open day and philosophically walked the streets with the same upon his head.
The morning comes, the night decays, the watchmen leave their stations. The grave is burst, the spices shed, the linen wrapped up. The bones of death, the covering clay, the sinews shrunk and dried, reviving shake, inspiring move, breathing, awakening. Spring like redeemed captives when their bonds and bars are burst. Let the slave grinding at the mill run out into the field. Let him look up to the heavens and laugh in the bright air. Let the enchained soul shut up in darkness and sighing, whose face has never seen a smile in 30 weary years, rise out and look. His chains are loose, the dungeon doors are open. And let his wife and children from the oppressor's scourge, they look behind at every step, and they believe it is a dream.
He earned a little fame, but no money. By these speculations, and had to depend for bread on the labours of the graver. All this neither crushed his spirit, nor induced him to work more in the way of the world, but it had a visible influence upon his mind. He became more seriously thoughtful, avoided the company of men, and lived in the manner of a hermit in the vast wilderness of London.
Oh, why was I born with a different face? Why was I not born like the rest of my race? When I look out, each one stares. When I speak, I offend. Then I am silent and passive and lose every friend. Then my verse I dishonour, my pictures despise, my person degrade and my temper chastise. And the pen is my terror, the pencil my shame, all my talents I bury, and dead is my fame.
Well, here he forgot the present moment and lived in the past. He conceived, verily, that he had lived in other days, and had formed friendship with Homer and Moses, with Pindar and Virgil, with Dante and Milton. These great men, he asserted, appeared to him in visions, and even entered into conversation. Milton, in a moment of confidence, entrusted him with a whole poem of his, which he wrote had never seen.
I assert for myself that I do not behold the outward creation, and that, to me, it is hindrance and not action. It is dirt on my feet, no part of me. When it will be questioned, when the sun rises, do you not see a round disc of fire somewhat like a guinea? Oh, no, no. I see an innumerable company of the heavenly host, crying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. I question not my corporeal or vegetative eye, any more than I would question a window concerning a sight. I look through it and not with it.
Being irritated by the exclusively scientific talk at a friend's house, which talk had turned on the vastness of space, he cried out, "It is false! I walked the other evening to the end of the earth and touched the sky with my finger." Later, a cultivated stranger, as a mark of polite attention, was showing him the first number of the Mechanics magazine. "Ah, sir," remarked Blake with bland emphasis, "these things we artists hate."
Mock on, Voltaire, Rousseau. Mock on, 'tis all in vain. You throw the sand against the wind, and the wind throws it back again. And every sand becomes a gem, reflected in the beams divine. Blown back, they blind the mocking eye, but still in Israel's paths they shine. The atoms of Democritus and Newton's particles of light are sands upon the Red Sea shore, where Israel's tents do shine so bright.
William Blake, an engraver at Felpham, was tried on a charge exhibited against him by John Schofield, a soldier, for having uttered seditious and treasonable expressions, such as "damn the king," Damn all his subjects, damn his soldiers, they're all slaves. When Bonaparte comes, it will be cutthroat for cutthroat, and the weakest must go to the wall. I will help him, etc., etc.
Well, I desired him as politely as possible to go out of my garden. He made me an impertinent answer. I insisted on his leaving the garden. He refused. I still persisted in desiring his departure. Then he threatened to knock out my eyes, and with many abominable imprecations, and with some contempt for my person, it affronted my foolish pride. I therefore took him by the elbows and pushed him before he had got him out.
After a very long and patient hearing, he was, by the jury, acquitted, which so gratified the audience that the court was, in defiance of all decency, thrown into an uproar by the noisy exultations.
Where the son of fire in his eastern cloud, while the morning plumes her golden breast, spurning the clouds written with curses, stamps the stony law to the dust, loosing the eternal horses from the dens of night, crying, Empire is no more, and now the lion and wolf will cease.
In May 1809, Blake opened an exhibition of his own on the first floor of his brother the hosier's house at the corner of Broad Street. The plan had the merit of cheapness, at any rate, involving little outlay or risk. The artist, in fact, not having money to venture. The exhibition comprised 16 poetical and historical inventions, as he designated them, a collection singularly remote from ordinary sympathies or even ordinary apprehension.
After my 3 years' slumber on the banks of the ocean, I again display my giant forms to the public. My former giants and fairies having received the highest reward possible, the love and friendship of those with whom it is to be connected, is to be blessed. Therefore, my dear reader, forgive what you do not approve, and love me for this energetic exertion of my talent.
William Blake, an unfortunate lunatic whose personal inoffensiveness secures him from confinement, and consequently, of whom no public notice would have ever been taken. But the poor man fancies himself a great master, and has painted a few wretched pictures, some of which are unintelligible allegory, others an attempt at sober character by caricature, representation the whole blotted and blurred and very badly drawn. These he calls in exhibitions, of which he has published a catalogue, or rather a farrago of nonsense, unintelligibleness, and egregious vanity, the wild effusions of a distempered brain.
Still admired by noble minds, followed by envy on the winds, re-engraved time after time, ever in their youthful prime, my designs unchanged remain. Time may rage, but rage in vain. For above time's troubled fountains, on the great Atlantic mountains, in my golden house on high, there they shine eternally.
It is the fashion to praise genius when it is gone to the grave. The fashion is cheap and convenient. Of the existence of Blake, few men of taste could be ignorant. Of his great merits, multitudes knew. Nor was his extreme poverty any secret. Yet he was reduced, one of the ornaments of the age, to a miserable garret and a crust of bread.
I am more famed in heaven for my works than I could well conceive. In my brain are studies and chambers filled with books and pictures of old, which I wrote and painted in ages of eternity, before my mortal life, and whose works are the delight and study of archangels. Why then should I be anxious about riches, fame, or mortality?
Blake had now reached his 71st year, and the strength of nature was fast yielding. Yet he was to the last cheerful and contented. He grew weaker and weaker, could no longer sit upright. And he was laid in his bed with no one to watch over him, save his wife, who, feeble and old herself, required help in such a touching duty.
But once when I did decry the immortal man that cannot die, through evening shades I haste away to close the labours of my day. The door of death I open found, and the worm weaving in the ground. Thou'rt my mother from the womb, wife, sister, daughter of the tomb, weaving to dreams the sexual strife, and weeping over the web of life.
Lest you should have not heard of the death of Mr. Blake, I have written this to inform you he died on Sunday night at 6 o'clock in a most glorious manner. He said he was going to the country he had all his life wished to see, and expressed himself happy, hoping for salvation through Jesus Christ. Just before he died, his countenance became fair, his eyes brightened, and he burst out in singing of the things he saw in heaven.
Youth of delight, come hither, and see the opening morn, image of truth newborn. Doubt is fled, and clouds of reason, dark disputes and artful teasing. Folly is an endless maze, tangled roots perplex her ways. How many have fallen there? They stumble all night over the bones of the dead, and feel they know not what but care, and wish to lead others where they should be led.
Thank you.
Now we'll have